Welcome back to Gaffers Salon. Thanks for coming back. This will be a relatively quick episode. The Nanlux 2400 bicolor just arrived yesterday. It's a pretty exciting time. This is going to be a very exciting year. There are obviously a number of manufacturers that are coming out with large LED cob bicolor fixtures. We're going to see apertures a little bit later. They're 2600 bi. Godox has released a 2400 bi. There's a lot of competition, a lot of options. And if I had to speculate, and this is pure speculation, my guess is that these lights are not going to be significantly different from each other relative to color metrics and photometrics. I think they're going to be pretty close. Undoubtedly, one will be a little brighter than the other one, but I really feel that the devil is going to be in the details, and it's going to be a lot about personal preference in terms of form factor, in terms of accessories, in terms of, brand loyalty, brands you like, how easy is it to get repaired, how good is the service, all those kind of factors are going to come into play. But I think just in terms of the photometrics and the color metrics, it's going to be a pretty close race. And so we're going to have to dive into those details, like on DMX, how well is it performing on a Q from 100% to 0%? Are we seeing much Kelvin shift as it dims? Are we seeing a green magenta shift at all as it dims? How well is it performing at 5% versus 10%? I think things like that are going to become, really important. Are the accessories available? Do we have to wait 6 months or a year before we see them? How many accessories are there? Size, form factor, weight, all these things are going to come into play. I'm very happy to have this. I haven't been able to fire it up yet, mainly because it just arrived yesterday and I was working, but also since I got one of the early shipping versions, this came with just a bare end cable. Here in the US, we could either put an Edison on here or a 60 amp Bates paddle, but I think ultimately when these are shipping, the plan from Nanlux is that here in the US, you'll get a cable that has a Edison plug, and built into the cable will be a rocker switch that'll allow you to limit between 20 amp and 15. So it'll be a 20 amp, 15 amp rocker switch, which will limit the draw. But one interesting thing, when I talked to Mark Bender at Nanlux and they were testing this in the warehouse in LA, full up, they were drawing roughly 21 amps on US domestic 120 volt power. So one could sort of extrapolate from that if we're trying to get down to sort of M18 territory of like 18 and change amps right up to 19 amps, we'd be able to operate this head somewhere around 90 to 95% output, which I think is pretty great for us here domestically in the US. I think we come very, very close to operating this at 100% on domestic power, assuming you have a 20 amp dedicated circuit. So that's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to testing this once I'll get the Edison plug. I'm going to wait till after Thanksgiving, after the holiday. I know I've been talking to both Andrew Locke in Melbourne and Luke in San Francisco, and Luke's been out with some of the San Francisco crew like Alan Steinhammer, and they've been spending some time testing this up against the usual suspects like M18s, M40s, etc. So I'm going to wait to look at Luke's review, see if there's anything he didn't cover that maybe I should cover. Often it's useful to cover some of the same stuff just to see if we're getting the same intel, the same readings, whether it's color metrics or photometrics, etc. But then if there's anything other people want to have tested, leave a comment if there's specifics. But I'll put this to the test in a week or so. I'll get my cable set up with an Edison plug. General first impressions about this light. I own quite a bit of Nanlux product. I've been a fan of of Nanlux. As well as other manufacturers too. As I've talked about, I own, a lot of Aperture. I own a lot of light gear. I own I own some Godox, Nanlite, etc., ProLight. But I am a big fan of Nanlux. I started with their Dyno 1200 and their Dyno 650 panel. I eventually bought a number of the Evoke 1200 daylights, which I love, but I owned those probably a year and a couple months before I sold them to upgrade to the bicolor version, which just seemed like something I had to have. It seemed like stuff that DPs really like, stuff that DPs were asking for, you know, just having that flexibility of having a bicolor head versus just a daylight only head was compelling to me. And so I decided, let me sell this. You know, the lights are still current. I was getting 70 cents on the dollar. It made sense for me to move to 3 1200 bicolor, and then eventually I added the 900 C Nanlux. So relative to build quality, if you have any experience with those Vokes, this is the same thing, only, you know, bigger. This is the 1200 bi head. I guess you could say maybe this is 50% larger. It is definitely larger, but it's not, you know, as crazy big as I was envisioning it might be. To me, it doesn't feel unwieldy. You know, it seems to fall between maybe an M18 and a 4K par. I think once if you eventually get the Fresnel for this. Right now, they just shipped me a basic version with just the 45-degree dish, so I don't have the spot dish or the wide dish. And the Fresnel is different. I have 3 Fresnels for my 1200 bis, but because of the larger head and the way it spot floods in, they had to design a new Fresnel. So this will eventually have a new Fresnel. Now, ballast-wise, it's a bit shocking how small and compact this ballast is. As Luke pointed out on his review the other day, it is not that significantly different than the 1200 Evoque ballast. I'd be hard-pressed to tell much of a difference unless I saw them side by side. It feels very much the same. The whole head and the ballast and the cables pack into a very nice travel road case that's roughly a 2-foot square cube, basically, with wheels. It has wheels, which is nice. Now, the reflector dish, they send out in a sort of soft case like this. I'm not sure. I imagine when we get a spot reflector, it's going to be a bit of a Magilla based on the size of the one for the 1200 Evoque. And then the wide, I'm sure, will be, you know, a stubbier one. So we'll see how they're going to solve that problem, if it's going to be multiple cases or what. So I think, you know, the other important distinction is that these heads, at least with Aperture and Nanlux, have added the green magenta correction, which I think, if you ask any gaffer now, it's absolutely mandatory. And all manufacturers should know, if you're building a bicolor light now, it has to include green magenta correction. I mean, it's the Achilles heel of bicolor. We know at some point, inevitably, it's going to skew green and magenta. We don't need that. We want the green magenta, not only to zero it out, but, you know, when we're in the supermarket or we're in crazy environments where we want to skew green or magenta, we can do that. So that's going to be really a huge plus. And I wish I had that in my 1200 bis, but, you know, that kind of wasn't a thing yet when those came out. So now I think moving forward, we're going to see that in any large bicolor head. So I have to say, you know, pretty impressed so far. I haven't fired it up. I've been chatting with Luke a lot and hearing a little bit about his feedback from what the testing they were doing. I'm looking really forward to seeing his reviews. I know Andrew Locke's got a few heads on the way as well. And we'll leave the DMX testing to him, because God bless him, he does that DMX testing, which is just so important. And I tried to do that once here in the shop, and it is tedious as hell. I didn't even make it through a full, I was going to include something in a review I was doing, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to leave that for Andrew. So anyway, we very much appreciate that. That and the color metrics is such an important thing. So all I have to say, when I get around to doing a review of this, I'll try to see what bits and pieces I can pick up or maybe cover that, you know, Luke or other folks didn't touch on yet. So anyway, that's the 2400 Nanlux bicolor. We'll be back with more.